A man thought he could get away with mocking the quiet, humble man sitting ahead of him on a first-class flight. But little did he know, the man he insulted was none other than Keanu Reeves, and the truth behind his words would leave him regretting every moment. Hey there, before we dive back into the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've got another amazing story coming your way tomorrow. It was a clear morning when the flight began. The engine hummed, and passengers settled into their seats, preparing for the long journey ahead. Among them was a man named Daniel, sitting comfortably in first class, feeling like he was on top of the world. He had earned this trip, or so he thought. His career was thriving, his life seemingly perfect, but there was always a void he could never quite fill. He wanted more, and he felt like he deserved more. The luxury of first class seemed to be just the thing that made him feel superior. As he reclined in his plush seat, he noticed a man sitting a few rows ahead. The man was quiet, with a calm demeanor, flipping through a book with little interest in the people around him. Daniel didn't recognize him at first, but something about the man intrigued him. His humble posture, his soft expression, something about it screamed ordinary, even though Daniel felt there was something special about him. A few minutes passed, and the flight attendants made their way down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. As they reached Daniel's row, he couldn't resist the temptation to whisper to the person next to him, "Look at that guy. He's probably some has-been actor trying to live off his past fame. He looks like he hasn't been relevant in years." The person next to him gave a small laugh, but no one else seemed to take much notice of Daniel's words. He continued to watch the man ahead of him, wondering if his insult had been heard. In truth, Daniel didn't care if it had been. His words had been sharp, a reflection of his own insecurities. But in the quiet of the cabin, a sense of satisfaction lingered as he imagined the man sitting ahead of him, unaware of the harsh judgment he had just received. But as the plane soared higher into the sky, something unexpected happened. The man in the front row stood up and turned around to face Daniel. The cabin fell silent for a brief moment as Daniel met his gaze. The man wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled. It was a gentle, knowing smile that almost felt like a warm embrace. His eyes weren't filled with hatred or spite, but rather, something deeper. Something that Daniel couldn't quite place. "Excuse me," the man said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I couldn't help but overhear your comment. I'm sorry if I've done something to upset you." Daniel was taken aback. He hadn't expected this. He had expected someone to defend themselves, or perhaps get defensive, but this man simply seemed calm. Too calm. "I didn't mean to offend you, but," Daniel trailed off, unsure of what to say. He realized that his words had probably hurt the man, but he still didn't fully understand who he was dealing with. He wanted to take it back, but his pride held him back. The man nodded, and then said, "It's all right. You know, sometimes people say things without realizing the impact. I've been there myself." Daniel blinked, his curiosity growing. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he was still unsure why this man seemed so familiar. The man chuckled softly. "Well, I guess I should introduce myself first. My name is Keanu Reeves." A wave of shock hit Daniel. He had heard of Keanu Reeves before, everyone had. The actor. The legend. But the man before him didn't look like the Keanu Reeves he saw on the screen. He was simply dressed, no flashy clothes or designer accessories. Just a humble man sitting in first class, reading his book, with no air of arrogance or superiority. "You, Keanu Reeves?" Daniel stammered, the words tasting different in his mouth now. Suddenly, his insult felt smaller, more foolish. Keanu smiled again, and his voice remained kind. Yes, I suppose that's me. I just wanted to let you know, sometimes the things we say can reflect more about us than about the people we talk about. I've learned that over the years. Daniel's face flushed with embarrassment. He couldn't believe it. He had insulted Keanu Reeves, one of the most respected actors, known not only for his roles but also for his kindness and humility. Daniel's words, filled with judgment and pride, felt small now. He felt the weight of his own actions pressing down on him. Daniel began, but his voice faltered. What could he say? How could he apologize for something so thoughtless? I didn't know it was you. I'm really sorry. Keanu nodded, understanding. It's okay. We all make mistakes. But it's important to realize that people are more than just what we see on the outside. I know I've had my own struggles, and I don't judge others for theirs. Daniel felt a mix of regret and shame. His words had been a reflection of his own frustrations, his own need to feel superior. But now, standing before someone who had truly lived through challenges, who had overcome more than most people ever would, Daniel understood something. He had a lot to learn. I didn't mean it, Daniel said quietly. I was wrong. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder gently. It's all right. The important thing is you recognize that now. Sometimes, life teaches us lessons in the strangest ways. As the flight continued, Daniel sat in silence, his mind racing. The man he had insulted was not just a movie star, he was someone who had lived a life filled with pain, loss, and hardship, yet still managed to remain kind and humble. Daniel couldn't help but feel grateful for the lesson he had learned, not just about Keanu, but about himself. In that moment, he realized that true greatness wasn't in the titles or the fame, it was in the heart and how we treat others. By the time the flight landed, Daniel had changed. He was no longer the same man who had made that thoughtless comment. He would never forget that moment, when his words had been met not with anger, but with understanding and wisdom. And from that day forward, he would carry that lesson with him, learning to choose his words carefully and remember that everyone has a story, even if they don't wear it on their sleeve. Keanu Reeves, with his grace and humility, had shown him a side of life he had never truly understood until then. As the days passed, Daniel couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He had spent so many years chasing after superficial things, success, status, validation. But now, he was starting to see the world differently. The way he viewed people had changed. No longer did he want to judge others based on their appearance or status. The lesson Keanu had unknowingly given him was more profound than any career achievement he had once thought was important. Back in his office, Daniel found himself reflecting on his words from that day. He could almost hear Keanu's calm voice in his mind. Sometimes the things we say can reflect more about us than about the people we talk about. It was a powerful reminder of how important it was to be kind, to take the time to understand others, and to realize that everyone carries their own struggles that might not be visible on the surface. He'd started apologizing more, not just to Keanu, but to others in his life. His colleagues, his friends, even strangers. It felt like a weight was lifting off him, as if every apology was a step toward becoming a better person. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. Weeks later, he found himself standing in front of a mirror, looking at his reflection with a new perspective. It wasn't just about looking good on the outside, it was about feeling good on the inside. It was about knowing that the person you were in private matched the person you showed the world. And the person he wanted to be was nothing like the man who had mocked Keanu on that flight. As luck would have it, Daniel was given an unexpected opportunity to attend a charity event. The event was being hosted by none other than Keanu Reeves himself. He was involved in many philanthropic efforts, quietly supporting causes that mattered to him. It was an honor to be invited, but there was also an underlying feeling of nervousness. Daniel wasn't sure how he would face Keanu again. What would he say? Would the apology he had given him on the plane be enough? When Daniel arrived at the event, he was taken aback by the warmth and kindness that Keanu exuded. He was just as humble in person as he had been on that flight, if not more so. He walked through the crowd with a genuine smile, shaking hands with everyone, never putting himself above anyone. Daniel watched him from across the room, admiring the way he interacted with others, his authenticity, his generosity of spirit. Keanu noticed him across the room and made his way toward him, extending his hand with a friendly smile. "Hey, Daniel. How are you?" Daniel froze for a moment. The last time they had met, things had been awkward, filled with regret and a sense of embarrassment. But now, Keanu's presence felt like nothing but kindness. "I'm good, Keanu. Thank you for everything," Daniel said, his voice sincere. Keanu smiled and gave a small nod. "I'm glad to hear that. I believe we all learn and grow. It's part of life." Daniel felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Here was the man he had wronged, yet he was treating him like an old friend. He took a deep breath, wanting to say more. "I just wanted to tell you. I've thought a lot about our conversation on the plane. And I'm really sorry for what I said. It was disrespectful. You didn't deserve that." Keanu looked at him with those calm eyes and gave a reassuring smile. "You don't need to apologize. I'm glad you learned from it. We all make mistakes, but it's how we grow from them that matters most." Daniel felt his heart swell with gratitude. It was the forgiveness he hadn't expected but deeply needed. Keanu didn't hold on to the past, nor did he let Daniel's mistake define him. He saw the potential for change, and that was something Daniel would always remember. As the event continued, Daniel spent the evening observing Keanu's interactions with others, how he listened attentively, how he spoke with genuine care, and how he used his platform to make a difference. It was clear to Daniel that Keanu was not just a talented actor, he was a remarkable human being. By the end of the night, Daniel found himself sitting at a quiet table, reflecting on how far he had come. He wasn't perfect, and he knew he still had work to do, but he was no longer the man who had mocked someone from a place of insecurity. He had learned the value of empathy, humility, and kindness, lessons that had come from an unexpected source. Keanu Reeves had changed his life, not by what he said, but by who he was. It wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about staying grounded, being authentic, and treating others with respect. Daniel knew that he would never forget the powerful lesson he had learned that day on the plane. As the night came to an end, Daniel made a promise to himself, to always strive to be better, to never judge a book by its cover, and to always choose kindness, no matter where life took him. As the days went on, Daniel began to notice more and more how his life had shifted. Every small interaction, whether with a colleague, a stranger, or a friend, seemed to carry more weight now. He had started to listen more, really listen, to the words people were saying and the emotions behind them. He wasn't so quick to judge anymore, and that made all the difference in his relationships. His workplace even began to notice the change in him. One afternoon, as he was sitting at his desk, a colleague named Sarah stopped by. She was someone who had always been kind to him, but Daniel had never really taken the time to get to know her. He'd been too caught up in his own world, his own ambitions, to notice the little things about the people around him. "Hey, Daniel. You've seemed different lately." "In a good way," she said, smiling softly. Daniel looked up, a little surprised by the comment. "Different how?" Sarah shrugged. "You just seem more open. Like you're paying attention to the people around you. It's nice." Daniel felt a warm feeling in his chest. "I guess I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm trying to be a better version of myself." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Better version? What brought that on?" Daniel paused, unsure of how much he wanted to share. But then he thought back to that plane ride and everything that had unfolded. "I had an experience not too long ago that really opened my eyes. I said some things to someone I shouldn't have, and it made me realize how easy it is to judge people, how quick we are to think we know someone's story. I realized I need to be kinder, to listen more, and to stop assuming." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a big realization. I think we could all use a reminder to be kinder. It's easy to forget when we're caught up in everything else." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yeah. It really is. And I think it's something I'll always carry with me now." As the weeks passed, Daniel's transformation became more visible to everyone around him. People started to recognize the difference in him, not just in his words but in his actions. He volunteered more, took time to help others, and started to really connect with those around him in a way he never had before. But the real change came when he decided to take a trip to visit his family. Daniel hadn't seen his parents in a long time, and his relationship with them had always been strained. He'd been so focused on his own success, chasing after things that didn't really matter, that he had neglected the people who mattered most. When he arrived at his parents' house, he was greeted with warm smiles and open arms. His mother embraced him tightly, and his father gave him a firm handshake followed by a hearty pat on the back. They sat down together for dinner, the conversation flowing easily. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he was truly present with them during the meal. His mother looked at him with a soft expression. "You've changed, Daniel," she said, her voice filled with gentle curiosity. "You seem happier, more grounded. What's going on?" Daniel thought for a moment. He didn't want to go into too much detail, but he knew his mom would understand. "I've been learning to be more present, to stop rushing through life and really appreciate the people around me. I've been thinking a lot about my actions and how they affect others." His father nodded, his face serious but filled with pride. "That's a good lesson to learn, son. Life's too short to live in the past or get lost in chasing things that don't matter." That evening, as Daniel lay in bed, he thought about everything he had gone through. The encounter with Keanu Reeves had been the spark that set everything into motion, but it was the small, everyday moments that had allowed him to grow. The conversations with his family, the connections with his colleagues, the simple act of listening, it all came together to show him a new path. He wasn't perfect, and he knew he would still make mistakes. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt at peace with who he was becoming. The things he once thought were important, the status, the power, the validation, had faded into the background. What mattered now was kindness, humility, and the connections he had with the people who truly mattered. One day, as he was reflecting on his journey, Daniel received an email from Keanu. The subject line simply read, "I hope you're doing well." Daniel opened the email, surprised by the personal message. It read, "Hey, Daniel. I just wanted to reach out and see how you've been doing. I know we had that moment on the plane, and I wanted to say that I'm really glad to see you've been taking steps toward growth. Life isn't always easy, but it's worth it when we choose to be kind to ourselves and others. Take care, and keep growing. All the best, Keanu." Daniel stared at the email for a long moment, his heart swelling with gratitude. Keanu didn't owe him anything, yet here he was, reaching out to offer encouragement. It was a reminder that kindness had the power to change lives in ways that could never be fully understood. With a smile on his face, Daniel typed a reply, "Thank you, Keanu. Your words have meant more to me than you know. I've been learning and growing, and I'll carry your message with me always. Wishing you all the best." As he hit send, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace settle within him. Life was no longer about proving anything. It was about becoming the best version of himself, embracing humility, and learning to appreciate the world and the people around him.